Prepare to have your health questions answered here on Safe, Effective Natural Solutions with Dr. Todd Binkley, owner of Binkley Healing Center in downtown Ventura. Now, here's Dr. Todd.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Todd Binkley, board-certified doctor of non-force chiropractic and practitioner of functional medicine. We're continuing a review of the latest research into brain health. Several episodes in a row now. I've been getting a lot of questions, a lot of feedback from these past 2 or 3 episodes. And so I ran out of time on the last one, so we're going to continue where we left off there. But the main focus is how to protect the health of the brain, how you can help your loved ones to keep their brains healthy and reduce the risk of the devastating effects of dementia and neurodegenerative conditions like Parkinson's. And I'm going to talk about one of my favorite patients, a lovely lady in her 80s who is doing a great job of reducing her risk of dementia by keeping herself healthy generally and in spite of various genetic predispositions. And that lovely lady is my mother. But before we do that, we're going to finish talking about where I left off last week, this article about the toxic effects of golf courses increasing risk of Parkinson's. Now, this article is specifically about Parkinson's, or a review of several studies specifically about Parkinson's, but I can promise you anything that increases your risk of, anything that involves toxins, exposure to toxins, increasing your risk of Parkinson's is also going to increase your risk of all neurodegenerative conditions of the brain, including all forms of dementia, including Alzheimer's. At the end of last week's show, I ran out of time in the middle of reviewing this excellent article in JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association Network Open, on Parkinson's, entitled "The Risk of Neurologic Disorder Rises for People Who Live Near Golf Courses." Yikes. A lot of people who are at the highest risk of these things naturally often move to be near golf courses, so that's not very encouraging to know about. But what's happening here? So the risk is from toxins. It's from all of the pesticides and chemical fertilizers that they put on these vast expanses of green that then slowly trickle down into the drinking water of the people that live nearby there. And so they determined that living within 1 mile of a golf course was associated with more than double the odds of developing Parkinson's disease compared with living more than 6 miles away. This was led by a researcher with a Polish name that's a little bit difficult to pronounce, Dr. Krzyzanowski, PhD of the Barrow Neurological Institute in Phoenix, and it was reported in JAMA in May of 2025. This was a study done in Minnesota with 1,419 Parkinson's cases and over 5,000 control patients. The median age was 72, and the study was done from 1991 to 2015. They collected data from 139 golf courses and 224 water services areas, and they found that the odds of getting Parkinson's disease decreased by 9% for every mile in distance from a golf course up to 18 miles. Wow, full stop. That stuff they put on golf courses is clearly not good. So you can always avoid these things. One way you can dramatically reduce your risk of these things, if you live near a golf course, for example, is to get a good water filter, a solid carbon block filter. So send me questions if you want to know more about that. A lot of people have reverse osmosis filters. That's the 3-chamber, very common type of filter that people have under their sinks. That will also filter out most of the toxins. Unfortunately, it also makes the water a little acidic, so a solid carbon block filter is better. But yeah, filtering that water can be really important. The data is now showing if you live near a golf course. The topography varies, obviously, in different regions, but limestone bedrock is very common. It dissolves over time, and it creates little underground voids that allow water from the surface to move rapidly through it and accumulate in your water that your water service area provides to your tap. The authors also encouraged people who live near golf courses to find out what days they spray the pesticides and other chemicals, and during those times try to stay indoors and close your windows, and putting a HEPA filter in your bedroom so that you're breathing clean air all night is always a great idea. Parkinson's disease has been tied to many environmental contaminants, including industrial solvents like trichloroethylene in drinking water and pesticides like simazine, atrazine, and lindane, all of which have long been known to be associated with the development of Parkinson's disease and used to treat golf courses for years. Dr. Krzyzanowski and her colleagues pointed out. They also reviewed data showing that pesticides such as paraquat and rotenone have been shown to induce Parkinson-like neurodegeneration in the substantia nigra. Substantia nigra is the part of the brain, main part of the brain that's damaged by Parkinson's disease. It has a role in movement and cognitive functions. It produces dopamine. It's the loss of function of that part of the brain that is primarily involved in Parkinson's. And so these pesticides, paraquat and rotenone, damage that induce neurodegeneration in those areas through oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, damaging the energy-producing part of every cell, and even death of the cells that produce dopamine. So you can get tested for your exposure. How do you know? Where chemicals are everywhere, it's sometimes frustrating. It's people get tired of hearing about them because you can often get the sense that they're unavoidable. What are you going to do? Well, exposures vary. Your genetic ability to excrete the toxins that you are exposed to varies, and whether or not you're getting the nutrients needed to excrete those toxins efficiently is really important. So let's say those things again. So obviously everyone's exposure to chemicals varies. And one of the best ways, there are known exposures. Now we know another one. Don't live near a golf course if you want to minimize your risk to Parkinson's, or take appropriate action to make sure that you're not exposed to the chemicals that they're using. But you can, in addition to dealing with known exposures and avoiding them or mitigating them, it's also important to at least know that the genetic ability for you and those you love to excrete things that you're both exposed to varies tremendously. And people have experienced this. You may, know someone who was diagnosed or, had the proper testing and found out that, wow, they had this toxic exposure and it's been causing them all kinds of problems, and now maybe they're working on eliminating it. But what about their spouse or their family members that lived in the exact same environment and didn't have a problem? How does that happen? So you can be exposed to certain things and have someone else sitting right next to you living in the same house with virtually identical exposure and not develop the same symptoms and other health-related problems. How is that? Well, your genetic ability to excrete the toxins that you're exposed to varies tremendously. And so have some sympathy with you. Some of us know that person that's sensitive to everything. They're sensitive to fragrance. They're sensitive to chemicals of any kind. And hello, I am one of those people. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Being insensitive to things that damage your health is far worse than being sensitive to them, because then you don't know that you need to do something to avoid those things. But some people just seem to be hypersensitive to everything. And that is partly genetic. That has been shown. So people's sensitivities in general to various types of toxins, it's different for everyone. So your exposure is different. How your body is going to react to the same toxins is going to be different than other people. And most importantly, when you want, the people who have another reason that some people don't have as much of a problem with a chronic toxic exposure. Maybe they work in a factory or some kind of industry with a lot of toxins and their best friend got cancer from it and they're fine. Another reason that experience varies is because even if you have the good genes that enable you, fortify your ability to flush toxins out more efficiently, maybe than the average person, your body needs certain nutrients to make that work well. The mechanisms your body uses to flush out toxins ongoingly every day. Your kidneys and your colon and your liver help filter these things out of your body and flush them down into the sewer system. But you need nutrients to facilitate that process and make it work at its best. And mainly these nutrients are minerals. All the minerals that so many people don't get enough of: calcium, magnesium, iron, selenium, zinc, chromium. There's a long list of micronutrients that you need in tiny, tiny amounts. And these are also measured, by the way, when you do toxic testing. So if you do a hair test or urine test with a chelating agent like DMSA, that's kind of a whole other conversation, but there's a couple of important ways to test these things. And the same tests, performed by the best lab in the country, Doctor's Data, the most accurate lab for testing these things, the test results also include your level of essential minerals. It shows you how much of these various healthy, important minerals are also being excreted by your body naturally. It gives you a proxy for your levels of it tells you whether or not you're getting enough of those in many cases. So all of these things are testable. You can get a hair test or a urine test to test your exposure to heavy metals, and a specialty urine test called ToxDetect. ToxDetect test is the premier test for measuring most of the pesticides, chemicals, fertilizers, other environmental things that we're exposed to. And it is from Mosaic Diagnostics, and that is available. And a lot of my patients have been very surprised to find out, oh my God, where did I get all this stuff? Well, we're all exposed to it, but it really kind of hits home when you see the data on the lab report right in front of you. And hopefully that can make it easier to motivate yourself or someone you love to, take the necessary steps to gently, safely, slowly, not fast. You make yourself sick if you do one of these crazy liver cleanses and try to clear out everything out of your body in 1 week or one vacation or something. You want to flush these things out slowly, gently, so that your body can eliminate them without making you sick. These things are stored mainly in fat cells throughout your body to keep them out of circulation, to keep them from irritating your brain, your cardiovascular system, your immune system. And so when you're trying to flush these things out, you're pulling them out of storage into circulation where they're floating throughout your body and, for a short period of time, irritating cells throughout your body again. So that's why you want to pull them out slowly, no faster than your kidneys, your liver, your colon can complete the process of flushing them out of your body. So out of storage into circulation, then through mainly the liver and the kidneys and somewhat the colon out into the sewer system. I'm Dr. Todd Binkley. You're listening to Safe, Effective, Natural Solutions to Almost Any Health Challenge. I sometimes get asked if I can help somebody who lives out of state. If you know someone, maybe something I've said on this show reminds you of a problem that your brother or your niece or your aunt in Washington State or Florida or Illinois or New York, can I help somebody that lives in those places? And the answer is yes. I have patients in all of those states and a dozen others. I can consult with your loved one anywhere in the country on the phone or a video call. Have them get their blood drawn in their town. LabCorp has a draw site within 5 miles of almost any city in the country. And the specialty labs for the toxin testings, those are all samples that you collect yourself and mail into the lab anyway. There's only one lab in the whole country. And then I receive the results online on a secure website and call you or them up. Well, it is nice to see patients face-to-face in the office, but it's often not necessary. And we can review the results on the phone, email, whatever, a video call, whatever's easiest for them. And this distance consultation or telemedicine that I've done with many, many patients is the standard of care I provide to one of my favorite patients, my own mother. And she's given me permission to talk about her case, and she's doing great. So my mom just turned 83, and her mother died at 79 of complications from open heart surgery. She also had severe arthritis with the gnarled fingers and stiffness and, aches and pains all the time that were difficult to deal with. And my mother also has arthritis, but it started many, many years later than my grandmother's did. And even though she's older, it's still nowhere near as bad as what my grandmother had. So my mom has outlived her mother by 4 years and remains in excellent health for her age. My mother's father, my mom's dad, my maternal grandfather, he began showing early signs of dementia in his late 70s and died of complications from Alzheimer's at 87. So I've taken it upon myself to help her in any way I can, obviously, to avoid that fate or prolong it as much as possible. I'd like to have her around for as long as she still feels good and healthy. And she kind of has a metric of her own. She's already told my sister and brother and me that she wants to live until we take her car keys away. So it's not my favorite metric, but that if it works for her, that is her motivation. She is taking good care of herself. She exercises every day. She walks 2 miles a day. She still travels regularly. She just visited me. She flew from Kansas to California and stayed for a week and earlier this year, and she still goes to church every day. She sings in the choir at Christmas, and she does her best to eat good food. She's doing actually really good with her diet, and she takes a handful of supplements from me, and we check her labs at least once a year and sometimes more. And she's doing great, and she's a great patient. She would much rather do anything natural than become dependent on drugs for the rest of her life. When she goes in to see her doctors back home, they often are surprised. They're shocked, actually, that she's not taking 7, 6, 7, 8 medications like all their other patients that are her age. And she, for example, one time a few years ago, her cholesterol was elevated and they wanted to put her on statin drugs. And of course, she said, thank you, but no thank you. And we got her cholesterol down, 30 or 40 points or whatever it was. In a few months, went and had her retested, and I had her take that in and show her doctor, look, my cholesterol's fine now. What about that? And he said, well, thinking that, of course, her doctor would be fascinated to know how she lowered her cholesterol without taking statin drugs. Was he interested? No. He also wanted her to take bisphosphonates, bone density drugs, osteoporosis drugs. And these things are, I'm not going to tell you not to take any medication some other doctor recommended for you, but I will tell you that these drugs are horrible. And I definitely did not recommend that my mother take them, and she didn't want to take them. And she is taking adequate forms of bioavailable calcium, vitamin D, vitamin K2, and collagen. And she hasn't had a fracture since she was in her 30s or 40s. And she's, her bones are in excellent health for her age, much better than a lot of her friends, for example, even who are taking those drugs and still end up falling and breaking their hip. In other news, the British Medical Journal just reported a meta-analysis of cardiovascular risk associated with the use of cannabis and cannabinoids. So these things are growing more popular. They're being legalized in several states. Sometimes patients ask me about them. What do I think about this? I'm not a fan. There are some uses for it that are pretty well documented for appetite. Cancer patients, other patients who have difficulty feeling, getting enough food in that makes them, helps with their appetite, and for pain control as well. A lot of data on pain control for some things with using these things, but they're not without risk. So this is an analysis that looks at the relationship between major adverse cardiovascular events and the use of cannabis, and they also used cardiovascular death, non-fatal acute coronary syndrome, including myocardial infarctions, and non-fatal stroke. So they found 24 articles, analyzed them, and found that your risk for acute coronary syndrome was 1.29, and 1.2 for stroke, and 2.1 for cardiovascular death. So that means you had a 29% increased risk of acute coronary, like a heart attack, a 20% increased risk for a stroke, and double the risk for cardiovascular death. So it's a really well done study, and it appears to be the first meta-analysis that examined the potential association of cannabis and these major adverse cardiovascular events. Further, they wondered, so how does it do this? What are the mechanisms that cause cannabis to increase risk of negative impacts on the cardiovascular system? So there were associations with oxidative stress, tissue injury, and cell death. Cannabis use was also pro-atherogenic, means it and pro-fibrotic and pro-inflammatory. So all three of those things are going to increase the plaque formation, blocking of the arteries, hardening of the arteries, and the formation of plaques that can become thromboses that could migrate and cause a heart attack or a stroke, and results in vasodilation and constriction in the sympathetic nervous system that could put additional stress on the entire cardiovascular system. One thing the study doesn't address is whether or not the effect is in part due to the smoke, or how much of these effects are due to the fact of smoking cannabis as opposed to doing an edible, for example. There are some well-known dangers with edibles because the manufacturers that make them have these ridiculous portion size. They give you something that looks like one serving, and then say in fine print somewhere, oh, don't eat all of that, only eat a tiny portion of it. So if you are going to do those things, definitely make sure to find out what the actual recommended serving size is before eating the whole thing. But my concern is smoke. They don't really mention anything in this study. They don't look at how much of these damaging effects to the cardiovascular system involved with cannabis use is simply due to the fact that someone is smoking the cannabis. Smoke of any kind is pro-inflammatory, pro-atherogenic, pro-fibrotic, increases hardening of the arteries. It irritates this delicate lining of the blood vessels throughout your body, just as it irritates the linings of your lungs. So smoking anything, cigarettes, marijuana, breathing in smoke from wildfires, as we've talked about on several previous episodes, which is becoming more and more unavoidable, and just any kind of smoke. So that, even the smoke from candles The smoke from anything that produces smoke. Fireplaces, a lot of these things aren't problems for most people, but they might be. Anytime you see something, any fine particulate matter that can float in the air, that you can see floating in the air, that's the definition of smoke. And any fine particulate matter that is light enough to float in the air is going to, when it floats in your nose, up your nostrils, and down your trachea and into your lungs, has a unique ability to reach the deepest crevices of your lung tissue, where it then gets lodged, and it's so difficult to cough or in any other way flush out. Your body makes mucus, and you have a coughing mechanism to try and get that junk out of your lungs. When your body realizes there's stuff in there that shouldn't be there, it causes you to cough, and it causes you to make more mucus, to produce phlegm, so that you cough that up and get that junk out of your lungs that you've been exposed to. But those mechanisms can only do so much. And when you have particulate matter like that and other things that your lungs cannot help you cough out, then it forms scar tissue. Your body forms scar tissue around these deposits, and those things cause things like chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and lung cancer. And of course, just like oxygen, anything you breathe in also goes into your blood circulation and courses throughout your arteries and veins to every cell in your body. So your lungs are designed to breathe in oxygen every day. That's how air reaches every cell in your body. It first has to pass through a membrane at the furthest recesses of your lungs, which is a very thin membrane that it can easily cross directly into your bloodstream. Every breath you take involves oxygen molecules coming across from the air you breathe through that slight barrier directly into your bloodstream so that it can reach all of the cells that depend on it for life. But because that membrane has to be so thin to allow oxygen to directly enter your liquid bloodstream, toxins of any kind that you breathe in can also work their way directly into your bloodstream and irritate the lining of your arteries in ways that cause little micro tears that your body then forms scars around, which eventually become plaques. The plaques that narrow your arteries reduce circulation to your brain and eventually can sometimes break off little fragments called thrombi, thrombuses, and migrate to your heart and cause a heart attack, or to your brain and cause a stroke. I'm Dr. Todd Binkley. You're listening to Safe, Effective, Natural Solutions to Almost Any Challenge. We're about out of time here, so I'll just talk about one more thing about creatine. A couple of episodes ago, we were talking about creatine and its beneficial effects that are now documented to actually even slightly reverse damage to the brain, damage that causes dementia and Alzheimer's. So this is really exciting, and I got a few questions about that. And there's a really interesting, for more information about creatine, a couple of people asked me, okay, where do I get creatine? What's the form that you recommend? And I recommend creatine from Thorne, Thorne. Thorne is the company that makes an excellent creatine supplement. And you can go to their website, thorne.com, and punch in creatine. There's an article on their website that was published this month called Creatine Benefits for Women's Health. It was in response to this same research that I talked about on the last couple of episodes. And it talks about how the evidence shows that creatine can be very beneficial for women's muscle strength, body composition, mood, energy, and overall health throughout their lifespans. And they have research at the bottom of that article to back it up. So you can find that on their website. And it highlights the fact that women consume less creatine, they store less creatine, and supplementing. The research shows that supplementing it is an option that many women might want to consider throughout their lifespans during childbearing age, through menopause. Estrogen and progesterone are known to alter creatine bioavailability as well as the expression of the enzymes that synthesize it in the body. So that's a little bit technical. Email if you have any questions about that. We are out of time. Once again, thank you so much for listening. Email me, or text me your questions anytime at Dr. Binkley at BinkleyHealingCenter.com. Have a fantastic weekend.
You've been listening to Safe, Effective, Natural Solutions with Dr. Todd Binkley. If you have a health question you want discussed on the show, email your health questions to Dr. Binkley at BinkleyHealingCenter.com. Take advantage of this opportunity to ask questions for yourself and for your loved ones, because our health matters. Join him next Friday at 2 p.m. for Safe, Effective, Natural Solutions here on 98.3 FM, The Word.